it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a fun card using this Memory Box Happy Holiday stamp set, as well as the Lawn Fawn Perfectly Plaid Rainbow 6x6 pattern paper pack. And I'm going to begin with my Copic coloring today, and I'm starting off with my little frogs, and for them I'm using YG01, YG03, YG05, and YG07, and I'm starting off with that YG07 and laying in my shadows. Since each of my frogs is facing a different direction, I'm imagining that my light source is right between them, so I'm going to shade on the back side of each of their bodies. So now I'm taking that YG05 and I'm just blending out that YG07 a little bit. I'm going to keep the face and the belly as my lightest areas. So now I'm going to take that YG03, and that one is a chow marker, that's why it has a different lid. I actually prefer the sketch markers since they have the oval shaped body that doesn't roll around on your desk, and they also have the numbers on the lids, and they're easily refillable and hold a lot more ink. But I started out with a dozen of the chows when I first got started with Copics years ago, so I still have those 12 in that style of marker, and they both work exactly the same way. It's just a different style of the actual barrel. And there's a little bit of that rolling chow in action. But anyway, now I'm going over my frog with a second layer. I like to do that sometimes if I feel like the blend isn't as smooth as I'd like it to be. So I'm just going back in with the YG07 and then blending that with the YG05. And then I'll take the YG03 and just finish up with that YG01 as my highlight. For my second little frog, I'm going to color him exactly the same, just flipping the shadows to the backside of his body so that that light source is between them, like I mentioned. I imagine that it's right overhead as if it was noon, and that's why it would be lighter on their face and the tops of their bellies, and then darker on the backside of their bodies. So you may have noticed at the beginning of the video when I showed this entire stamp set that it's called Happy Holiday, and it is meant to be mostly a Christmas set, I would say. I think it was released at Christmas time, and it definitely has some different holiday images and 2 holiday sentiments in it. But I think they were really smart by making it so versatile, because they also made sure to include several images that can be used for every day, and it also has 2 everyday sentiments. So this is a set that really goes the distance if you're on a budget, or you just want to have stamp sets that work all year round. This is a great one to have. Plus, these frogs are just super cute. So now I'm just starting in on my second layer of coloring on this little frog, and if you notice right before I began, you could totally see the difference between what one layer of Copic coloring looked like as opposed to going over a second time. The frog on the left had a much better blend, and now they look more equal. So now I'm just going back in with my YG07 and adding a bit of dot detail, just some little freckles and spots like frogs would have. This gives them a lot more personality and makes them a little more unique and adds a little bit of texture to your coloring as well. Moving on to my lily pads, I'm using G14, G17, and G19. And I started with the G19, and I'm just putting some shadows down at the bottom edge. I'm actually going to flip these later on the card, so the darker part will be the top back edge behind the frogs. So I'm just blending with the G17 and then finishing with the G14. And then I wasn't quite achieving the amount of depth that I wanted, so I decided to go ahead and pull in the G28. And that gave me a lot more contrast, and then I'm just going to blend that out quickly with the G19 and the G17, and then just finish with the G14. The other two lily pads, I'm going to go ahead and shade the back side since they are facing the direction that I want them to be on a card, with that kind of notch that's cut out towards the front. So I'm just starting with that G28, and I'm doing both of them at once since they're so small and they blend quickly. And then I just blended those with the G19 and then a little bit of that G17, and then leaving that G14 for the highlight at the front where the sun would hit. And I really like this color combination. This isn't one that I pull out very often, but I think these blue-greens kind of work really well for these lily pads. I'm using C1, C3, and C5 for the microphone. And again, just coloring darkest to lightest. So I'm using that C5 first to just add in some shadows. And then I will blend that out quickly with the C3. And just finish with the C1 for my highlighted areas. For the water lilies, I'm going to use RV21, RV23, and RV25. And starting with the RV25, I'm just adding a little bit of accent to the inside of each of those petals. I'm also going to color the frog's mouth, the one that has the open mouth, with each of these three shades. So now I'm moving on to that RV23 and just blending out that RV25 a little bit, leaving a little room on the edges of the petals for that RV21. So just finish the frog's little mouth and then blend out those petals so that we have a nice transition and they look darker in the centers and lighter at the edges. So now I'm taking a little strip of that perfectly plaid rainbow paper, and there's a little bow that is included in this stamp set. So I'm going to stamp that out a couple of times on different areas of the pattern. I only need 2, but I stamped it out 4 times just to give me some options of what colors I might like to use. And I'm just going to die cut everything with the matching dies. I have also die cut myself out of focal panel using the Lawn Fawn cross-stitched squares. And I'm going to take some peacock ink and stamp out my sentiment using my Misty, and that says Happy Birthday. And I'm just going to ink that up a second time to make sure that I have a really good impression, since this ink does dry back quite a bit into the paper. And while I have my Misty and my ink out, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the inside of our card. And I've used several different images as well as the other everyday sentiment. So there's a little frog and there's a fly buzzing around with a little trail, and then the sentiment that says "Come fly with me." I've die cut a piece of dark green cardstock using the Lawn Fawn Meadow Borders dies and Stitch Hillside Border dies. And by putting that in the middle of my blue panel, it's going to make the top part look like sky, and then the bottom portion is going to be my pond, and then the grass will be my bank. And I'm just going to push that down with some foam tape and then trim off this one little piece of grass that was covering up part of the sentiment. And now I can start to create my scene. So I'm adding a little foam tape to the back of my largest lily pad, and that's going to go in the top left corner of the pond portion there. And then I'm just seeing where I want my little frog to go. I'm going to add some foam tape directly to the space between the lily pad and my little grassy bank so that he will be well supported. And I'm just going to add a little Tombow Mono multi-glue to the areas that will be touching the lily pad and the bank. And I will also use a tiny little sliver of foam tape to support my microphone stand. I do send out most of my cards to friends, so I want to make sure that nothing is going to get crushed in the mail. I'm going to grab one of the 2 smaller lily pads and add that to the top right corner of my little pond area, and that is where my second little frog is going to sit. And again, just adding a little foam tape to kind of fill in that gap so he won't sink down in there. And my last lily pad is going to go right down in front, and I just left some of that foam tape exposed so that I could pop my little water lily right over top of that. And my other water lily is going to go on the front of my largest lily pad. And I'm just adding a little Tombow Mono to go ahead and adhere that down. I'll also put a little dab on each of the throats of my little frogs. And you can put this little bow tie so that the longer loops are facing up or down. And I decided to do one of each. That way they are just a little bit different. Or you could also put it on one of their heads and make them a girl frog. But I chose to do the bow ties. I just thought those were cute. I'm using some Memento Tuxedo Black ink to stamp out these little music notes 3 times across the top of my focal panel, just to kind of emphasize the idea that they're singing. My card base is a piece of W+9's Lake House Blue cardstock, which is the same cardstock that I used for my focal panel. And I'm just going to adhere one of these plaid pattern papers from Lawn Fawn down with some Tombow Mono multi-glue, and I've trimmed that to be 4 inches wide by 5 1/4 tall so that I have a little bit of that blue border showing around the edges. I'm also going to take this blue plaid that is also from the Lawn Fawn Perfectly Plaid papers and just adhere that down on top. And I did die cut the bottom edge of that with the Lawn Fawn Party Banner die to give me a little bit of a stitched flag end. I'll add some more Scotch 3M foam tape to the back of my focal panel, just making sure to space those out so that the whole thing is well supported. And then I can just peel off those backer sheets and line up that panel in the center of my card and just pop that down. To finish things off, I'm going to take some Pretty Pink Posh clear droplets. This is in the 4 and 6 millimeter size. And I'm going to add some Ranger Multimedia Matte to my card. And then I can just pick these up and pop them over top of that adhesive. This adhesive works great for things like this. It's super strong. And you'll see that these are now white underneath, but they will dry perfectly clear. And I apologize for the vast change in lighting here. It was raining all day, and then all of a sudden the sun came out and made everything super bright on my desk. As a final embellishment, I'm just going to grab my Spectrum Noir clear glitter brush pen, and I'm going to add a bit of sparkle to the shaded areas on the 2 frogs, and also to the centers of the 2 water lilies. So just enough to add some interest, but not enough to overpower it. And this stuff is notoriously hard to pick up on camera, but I'm going to try for you guys, so hopefully you can catch a little bit of that as it moves in the light. It's super pretty in real life. So that is going to complete our card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps me be aware of what kind of videos you guys like to see. Here's a couple extra videos you may also be interested in, and you can always click on my photo to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Thank you guys so much for all your positive comments and support. I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.